Hello, welcome to my Live at 5 painting demo. I'm Allie Kay. I'm going to try to be able to talk for the rest of this. So if you are new here, I am going to do a painting. I'm going to do this portrait of this cute little boy here. And I'm going to walk you through the steps that I take as I work on the portrait. So I'm going to explain the colors that I'm using and why I'm using those colors, and just give you some little tricks that I use whenever I paint. Hello everyone who is just joining me. Let's see, Lynn says it's quiet. Okay, I'm going to try talking a little bit louder. And if anyone else is having trouble hearing me, please let me know. Welcome to everyone who is just jumping in. I'd love for you to say hello and let me know where you are watching from. It's always really cool to see the different places around the world that you guys are catching my demos. Kayla says volume is good. Awesome. Thank you, Kayla. All right. Well, either way, I'll try to talk nice and clear so that you guys can hear everything. You guys probably see behind me is the horse that I painted last week. Friday is his name. And he is not quite finished. I'm going to post a picture of that one pretty soon, but it's really close. So gosh, a whole mess of you are jumping in. I love it. Thank you guys. Awesome. Hi, Jill in Southern California and Lynn in Fort Lauderdale. All right, everybody. Bridget's here in Tennessee, where I am. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. All right, guys, so why don't we just, let's see, we've got Annette in Norfolk, England. Awesome. And Jacqueline in Ohio. All right. Okay, super. So I'm excited because this is a bigger panel. This is 20 by 20. So I think it's going to make it a little bit easier for y'all to see it, and just for me to kind of work my way around the panel. So I'm excited. I like to work big. I've been doing some smaller ones. I've even done some 8 by 10 portraits. But my favorite is really to stretch out and spread my wings a little bit with my brush strokes. So here we go. Hi, Elena and Maxine. And Rasa in the UK. Awesome. We have people all over. This is so incredibly cool. Okay, awesome, guys. All right, so what I have here is my outlines. And many of you who watch my demos know that I transfer my outlines, but just in case we have new people, and I think we do, I'm going to show you my transfer really quick. So this is super easy. Sometimes I use a projector, but when I'm doing a portrait, I think I want to be really, really accurate. I think it's actually better to transfer the lines. So I printed the picture of this sweet little boy out, the same size as my panel. It's 20 by 20. And I divided it up onto a whole bunch of sheets of paper so I could print it on my home printer. And then I traced over it with transfer paper underneath. This is Jack Richardson, I think, transfer paper that I get from Dick Blick. So you can order that online. It comes in 24-inch wide rolls and 24 feet long, so it's pretty great. So that's all there is to it, guys. I just transfer it, and then I painted over my outlines with a light purple, and I used this little skinny script liner brush to go over the lines. It just makes it really easy to just loop right over it. So I made my light purple using alizarin crimson, Payne's gray, and white. And again, I am using golden fluid acrylics. These are water-based acrylic paints. I prefer the fluid acrylics because there's more pigment in them, and I like to work in thin layers. So that is my cup of tea. Some people like more of a heavy-bodied paint, but I like it nice and smooth. So that's what I usually choose. Okay, so that's what I've done so far. And the first thing that I'm going to do as I jump in here is I'm just going to look for some of my darkest darks in my image. And I'm just gonna put those in and start just pulling out some of the forms and the shadows. So I'm going to make a dark using alizarin crimson and Payne's gray. I never ever buy black. I always mix my black, so this is a nice like rich purple that I'm going to make. And right off the bat, some of the darkest areas that I see are in the eyes and around the mouth. So I'm just gonna zoom right in on my image. I like to paint from a screen, particularly an iPad, because I can just zoom right in like that and just focus on the area that I'm painting. It just makes it a lot easier. So it's pretty dark around his eyes. I'm gonna thin my paint with a little bit of glaze, and I'm just using Liquitex Matte Medium. And so I'm just going to look for those dark shapes in the eyes. So the eyelashes here are very dark, the pupils are very dark. And unfortunately, when I work in these smaller areas, y'all probably can't see it too well, but I have to get in here and do this before I continue any further with my washes. So just bear with me here while I put some of these details in. I like to push the shadows a little bit more before I do my underpainting wash, just so that I don't lose them, because once we do the underpainting, we won't see the definition quite as much. So it's kind of dark in the nostrils, so I'm gonna push that a little bit darker. If you have any questions, please just put those right into the chat there. I am jumping back and forth here and looking at your comments, so I'm happy to answer your questions. And you guys are the lucky ones who are watching this live, so that's the fun part. You can ask me whatever's on your mind. And then of course this is also available as a replay, so you can always share it to your page if you know anybody else who might be interested in just watching a free little painting class. So that's what I'm here for. Okay, so those are pretty much the very darkest areas around the eyes, the pupils, the lashes, the nose, and then that shadow inside the mouth. Oh, it looks like we froze. Are we frozen here? Maybe? We're good. Okay. Jacqueline's asking how I complete the edges. Do you mean the edges of my panel? I just paint those a solid color, usually a dark color, to complement the painting. So that's all I do there. Okay, you guys are saying no, I didn't freeze. Okay, good. Glad to hear it. All right, we're gonna press on. So I got those dark details in. Now I'm gonna switch to a slightly larger brush and just push some of the other darker areas. I'm gonna thin my paint a little bit. I added a little bit of water, a little bit of glaze. In these early stages, I use a little bit of each. And I'm still just using this dark purple. So just kind of looking at him, I see it's dark under his ears here. I need to add a little more pigment to my paint. Oh, I accidentally dipped it into my purple, but that's okay. I actually have permanent dark violet on my palette here as well, which is more of a true purple. And that's okay. So it's making it a little more purple. I'm gonna go back into that alizarin crimson and Payne's gray for my mixture, because I like that better. All right, so right now I'm just shape finding. I'm not worrying really about the color of things. I'm just doing some washes to push what is dark and what's light. Hi, Karen in Florida, and Adele in Chattanooga. Hi, Adele. to switch to a slightly larger brush. But I'm just kind of comparing. So I've got all my lines on here, but I have to kind of tell myself what those lines mean. Like, was I outlining a dark form? Was I outlining a highlight? So when I do these washes, that's going to help to tell me what I was thinking when I was putting these outlines, because it kind of flips back and forth. Sometimes I might be outlining a dramatic highlight, and sometimes I might be outlining a major shadow. But when I do those outlines, I'm not tracing everything. I'm just looking for the major forms. I'm just giving myself a little road map to indicate where some of those major shapes are as I proceed with my painting. And I feel like that's so important because it just gives me like an indicator of what is what. I'm going to switch to a slightly larger brush while I'm mapping in some of these shapes. Get it to move a little bit more. I always say use the largest brush that you can to get the job done. Don't try to do a bunch of little hash marks, because it's just you're gonna be fighting it. It's gonna take more time, and it's gonna make your painting feel less natural to have all these little hashes. So it's like, if you have a large area of shadow or highlight, just put it in with a large brush. Just do one swoop and be done, rather than a bunch of little chops. Sometimes people think that showing brushwork means to have a bunch of little hashes, but really it doesn't. It just means when you've got an area that can be done in one brush stroke, you do it in one brush stroke, and then you're able to see that brush stroke. I like brush strokes, can you guys tell? I also like color. So we're going to do a complementary color underpainting on this piece. That is how I typically approach my work. So complementary means opposite on the color wheel. So the complement to red would be green, the complement to purple would be yellow, complement to blue would be orange. But I don't work with like the exact true complement. I kind of fudge it to make it work with what I want to happen in the painting. So that's the fun thing about artistic license. You are in control of your painting and you get to decide what's what. So I use a lot of the same colors for my complementary color underpainting. You'll see them over and over if you watch some of my other live demos. I've been doing these weekly demos every Monday at 5 Eastern, and there's a bunch of them out there. So if you guys haven't seen all of them, if you go on my page and just look up videos, you're gonna find a whole mess of them, because I've been doing this pretty much every week. And it pretty much started like when quarantine hit. I think the first demo I did was in March. I did quite a few florals then. I was just painting these small little florals, really just to make me happy. But now lately I've been doing quite a few portrait commissions. So now I'm thinning my paint out a little bit more, and because I want some of these shadows on the face to be a little bit lighter. So just loosening up with that paint, the layer of paint, but I still just have my alizarin crimson and Payne's gray mixture on here. And I can be really quick with these brush strokes because I know exactly where everything goes, because I was so careful about my underpainting and getting my lines just perfect. And really, when you transfer them, you can be really sure about that. So that allows me the freedom to not be guessing, like, did I put the nose in the right place? You know, is the one eye too high? I don't have to worry about any of that because I put the features on there with the transfer, so I know that they're perfect. So being able to draw is a wonderful skill, and I don't think that anyone should, you know, choose not to do it. I think it's a great thing, but I'm just saying sometimes for planning a painting, you really just want to get it done. So there's nothing wrong with transferring those lines and being really sure about what you're putting down there. So, and drawing is a whole other art form. I mean, there are beautiful, beautiful drawings that don't require any color or paint at all. All right, just looking at your comments here. You guys are from all over, so cool. Again, if you are just jumping in, feel free to introduce yourself, and also feel free to ask any questions of me that you might have, things that you might want to know while I'm working on this painting, because I'm going to do a bunch of things at once here. I'm going to paint the painting and I'm going to answer your questions. All right. So you can see how it's starting to look more like him, right? He's starting to have some dimension. I'm just gonna adjust my lighting here a little bit because I feel like it was shining a little too bright and you guys couldn't, you were getting kind of a glare. I think that might be better. All right, it's always a struggle. Oh, you know, I don't have my ceiling lights on. I'm gonna turn those on. That's better. Okay. The sun was kind of coming in through my windows really bright when I started, and I didn't even realize I didn't turn my ceiling lights on. All right, so I think that is good for getting my shadows on before my underpainting. Now I'm going to do my wash. Oh, there, I think now you can see him a little bit better. Okay, so the color that I do for a wash under skin is pretty much always permanent violet dark from Golden. It's one of my favorite colors and it looks really, really pretty under skin. So I'm using, I switched to a bigger brush now. I like my square tip brushes. I'm looking at your comments. Cindy says, what kind of printer do I have? I have a laser printer. Let me just look. It's an HP. I actually about a year or two ago, I invested in like a really big serious laser printer. But for that template that I showed you, you could use any printer. I mean, my printer only prints 8.5 by 11. It doesn't do larger than that. So I just had to divide it up in Photoshop, and I did a grid and then just took one chunk at a time. So with this being a 20 by 20, I actually had to put it into 9 little chunks, but I've done that so many times that I'm really quick at it and it doesn't take very much time. And if you want to learn how to do that in Photoshop, I have a Photoshop class coming out. I said by the end of October, I'm going to really try to stick with that. But I'm going to teach you guys how I use Photoshop as a painter. So I don't use it to actually create paintings, but I use it as a tool for my paintings a lot. And I know a lot of you are interested in just learning some of those really easy tricks and ways to incorporate it into your work and make it work for you. So I'm working on that. I'm excited about it. I know I keep mentioning that class, but a lot of people keep messaging me saying, you talked about that class and we haven't seen it yet. Is it still happening? So I just want to keep mentioning it that yes, it is happening. It's coming. Okay, so I'm also putting this purple in the hair. But one thing I want to mention is because there are some darker shadows in the hair, I'm putting the purple underpainting down darker in the areas where I know my overpainting is going to be darker. So the lightest part of his face, this left side, I'm leaving my underpainting very light there because that allows me to not have to fight it quite so much. I've already got that dimension built up. And then the same thing with the dark shadows. I don't have to work as hard to push them dark if I do my underpainting dark in those areas. So that's what I'm thinking here. So I'm going back some of the places where we've got some darker shadows on the face and just pumping up my underpainting a little bit there. These are some of the places where I already put that wash down a little bit darker in my first layers. Let's see, Eva's asking, did I use the permanent dark violet for both the underpainting wash? No, I used a purple made from alizarin crimson and Payne's gray for my underpainting. So this is more of a muted purple. And Annette is asking, can you tell me what color you are used to get the cover? Can I buy it in England? I think you can buy golden in England. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think it's a worldwide company. So yeah, I just did that mix for this more muted purple, and now for the wash, I'm using permanent dark violet. All right. And I posted a link, this was like last week, maybe the week before, where I have a guide to all the colors that I recommend, and I also give a few like recipes that I use, and you can find it on my page, but I'll post it in the comments here too, in case you guys want to download that, because you might find that helpful. All right, so now underpainting for, let's do his shirt. So his shirt is like a peach, and so for underpainting that, I'm going to do green. So I'm going to use phthalo green blue shade, which is like a really cool emerald green. So I'm just gonna lay that down, nice and strong. My paint's kind of dripping because my panel's really smooth. This is a masonite board panel, so it has no texture at all. So it's very slick. So when I have the paint really thin, it'll kind of has a tendency to run down it a little bit, but it doesn't really bother me. I just kind of come back and catch it. So doing a nice thin wash there, and then the same thing, the areas where I feel like that peach is going to be a little bit darker, I'm going to pump my green up just a little bit more and deepen it in those areas. Karen's asking, are you using acrylic paints? Yes, I'm using Golden Fluid Acrylics. That is my favorite. So these are water-based paints. Golden is like the king of the water-based paints. Their pigments are just super strong. They are the best. They are more expensive, but they are the best. All right, so this is, my green is a little too wet for me to darken that right now, so I'm gonna do that later. I wanna point out though, did you guys notice when I did this wash, I didn't worry about getting like a clean edge at the edge of the shirt. I actually intentionally went past it because I want this to be loose. So don't worry about making that underpainting edges perfectly crisp. Jill's asking, what kind of panels did I use? So the front is a masonite board. The sides, the cradle on the sides is 2-inch pine. And for these larger panels, I actually just have a carpenter that I know build them for me. Okay, so the color I'm gonna do underneath the brick red wall, I'm going to do phthalo blue and phthalo green mixed together, which is gonna make like a nice teal. So I'm just kind of changing it up, like the background red and the peach are very similar toned colors, but I don't want to do the same underpainting color underneath them. So on the wall, I'm going to do more of a blue because I want to. And I'm going to try not to get this on my iPad. I keep getting paint on my iPad because I paint so quick, and then I always have it really close to my panel. And again, I'm not trying to be careful about where the hair starts and stops. I'm letting it overlap because it's kind of cool to see that those underpainting colors like run together. I actually really like that, so I'm doing that on purpose. And there's something about the vibrancy of these like watered down paints that you can't get by keeping a paint more opaque. So like with this bright blue and green that I'm using, if I tried to lighten that color using white, it would not have this intensity because white actually dulls a color. So the only way to get this intensity is in a wash. So I will work with more opaque paints in later layers, but I love the intensity of this really bold wash underneath. It's just really fun to work with that contrast. I'm trying to adjust my lighting here, guys, because I feel like you're getting kind of a weird glare, and I want you to be able to see everything. That looks better for you guys now. You can just adjust that a little bit more. Okay. All right, so you want to make sure that your underpainting is dry before you start layering color on top of it, because you don't want the underpainting to mix in with the paints that you're layering on top. Okay, yeah, I can tell that it's looking better on the camera, so I want you guys to be able to see everything. But since I was thinning with water, I think that the face is pretty good. So we're just gonna jump right in and start putting some skin tones down. So let me just say that this is definitely the scary part when you're switching to putting like the actual color down. But just don't worry, it's gonna be fine. Just keep going. So my skin color recipe that I use, is 4 colors. It is titanium white, pyrrole red light, Hansa yellow opaque, and burnt umber light. So I feel like I can make almost any tone of skin using those 4 colors in different combinations. So I'm going to start my first layer of skin with the mixture that I'm going to make with those. And this is probably the hardest part to explain, but I'm going to start carving out kind of the mid-tones. So I'm kind of looking like the lighter 50% of the face. Some areas where it's the very brightest, I'm not going to put that in just yet. So I'm kind of just working in the middle. And sometimes I don't know if I have my color recipe just right until I actually put it on there. So I'm kind of guessing on my palette, and then I'm just going to lay it down and see how it looks. Yeah, I think that works. So in this stage, I want to be very intentional about leaving areas of my purple underpainting showing, because I put that down for a reason. I like seeing it kind of poke through in between the skin tones, and once I cover it all up, I can't get it back. So I'm being very intentional about this. I'm just kind of skipping around and pulling out some of the highlights. Eva's asking one more time the color for skin. So the 4 colors that I am using for this skin tone are titanium white, pyrrole red light, Hansa yellow opaque, and burnt umber light. And if you download my color guide that I mentioned earlier, which you can find on my Facebook page, you can also find it on my website. I've got that recipe and I go through it a few times in a little mixing tutorial, so you can find that on there. Now the lip, the upper lip is cooler. I don't know if you can tell that in the photo, but I'm actually not going to put this color on the upper lip because I'm seeing a lot more gray tones there. I might put one little dash of it, but I'm going to skip right over that for right now because we're going to need to adjust that a little bit. And when you're mixing up this first pass of skin and it's on top of a lot of purple, For some reason, the way the eye works, it always looks more yellow than what it looks like on your palette. So I usually overcompensate by adding a little bit extra of the Pyrrole red to warm it up a little bit more, because on my palette it actually looks more red and pink than what I'm seeing here on the panel. So I usually just kind of exaggerate the red to make up for that a little bit. I think it just has something to do with the way your eye works with the purple underneath. So I'm just kind of jumping around the whole face and adding these little bits of skin tone, and then my next step is going to be to make a lighter skin tone. I need to get a little bit more of this down first. And this is always kind of that awkward stage, I'll call it, where it's like transitioning from one thing to another. Sometimes I call it the awkward teenager stage of the painting, where it's like just kind of gotta wait till things kind of work themselves out. And this can be a time where you feel like you want to quit, but don't quit. Just keep going. Okay, so now that I've got some of that color on there, I'm going to switch and add a little more white to it to lighten it up and pull out some of the brighter highlights. So I just want this next pass to be a notch lighter. And I do have this thin with a little bit of matte medium glaze. And I'm using, this is like a number 7 square tip brush. So, you know what? That is not light enough. I need to add a little more white in there, and I kind of want to warm it up a pinch. So I'm gonna add a little more pink to it, a little bit more Pyrrole red, I should say. See how that looks. Yeah, I think that works. So I want it to be like dramatically a notch or two lighter than what I had, so I can see the difference. So it's kind of like we're making a gradient. We're building steps. So this next step is going to be a little bit lighter, and that's going to create dimension. And if you are thinking about trying portrait painting, you know, maybe for the first time or it's been a while, you know, definitely I suggest trying it on a big panel like this, because it's going to just help you to have room to make some of these choices. I just think it's more fun too. Sometimes it's so hard to get in there and do what you want to do if you're working in a really tight space. Sometimes people think if they're new, they have to start small, but when I teach my workshops, I usually have students work like 18 by 18, just so they have room. This is a really cute photo too, and that's another little piece of advice is if you are trying to get started on the painting, like make sure that you're starting with a good photo. Don't try to force a photo that doesn't have good lighting or good detail, because you'll just be working against yourself. Okay, so now we've got, well, let's see, I need to brighten up on the nose a little bit. Okay, so now we've got 2 different colors of skin tone on there. Now I'm gonna go, so we kind of started in the middle. Now I'm going to work backwards, and I'm going to put a slightly darker skin tone. So it's going to be a little bit darker than that first layer that we put down. I just realized I need to get a little bit more of these highlights on the nose first. So it's kind of like a push and pull. Like we started in the middle, And now we're gonna work our way backwards. And this new slightly darker color, I'm gonna warm up a little bit more too. So I'm gonna add a little bit more of the Pyro Red to it as well. But I can still keep working in the same little puddle of my palette here because I'm using the same 4 colors. So I'm just gonna add more Burnt Umber and more Pyro Red and a little bit more Hansa Yellow. So I just want to make sure that this new tone, which I'll also thin a little bit with some glaze, I want to make sure that it's slightly darker than my first pass. I think I've got it. Okay. And so this, maybe it's dark enough. I might need to push it a little bit more. But you can see it's a little bit more rosy. I need to put a little more red in there. Pyro Red. Pyro Red Light is a really nice, like warm mixing red. It makes a really nice orange when you mix it with the yellow. Because there are warm and cool colors. So there are some reds that are much more of a cool red. So you would have a hard time making an orange with a cool red. Yeah, these little pops of warm tone really make the figure kind of come alive. That's an issue that I see a lot with portrait painting, is sometimes the skin can just look so kind of lifeless. And I think the way that I keep my skin really rich is having all these different tones going through, and really these little pops of warmth make such a difference. You don't want your figure to look like it has mannequin skin. So if you think about, like, you know, a mannequin, it has you know, highlights and shadows, and it has form, but there's something to it that you can just tell it's not human, you know? So it's because it doesn't have that range of skin shifting. It's just, you know, all one tone with shadows and highlights. So there is definitely a difference when you are showing that in your piece. It's what gives your piece life. Okay, so just bopping around looking for these warm tones. There's some underneath the hair up here. And I'm kind of squinting to find these. That's another good little tip. Sometimes you can see your image better if you kind of squint at it. Kind of just simplifies the forms, helps you to not get too hung up on those details. Okay, so for right now, I think I've got enough of my skin tone. Oh, I want to put some of this warm tone in the ears. Ears are almost always warmer than other skin, so they've got more red in them. I put a little bit in the ear right here. I didn't even put that in yet. Kind of in shadow. Okay, so the next step that I'd like to do is to kind of get some detail in the eyes, because I feel like it just starts to make it come to life. Hi, Vicki, thank you. I hope I'm making it look easy. I would be in trouble if I made it look hard, right? Okay, so we are going to work on the eyes. My first step with the eyes is I like to put the whites of the eyes in. And that is one place where it is so easy to go wrong, because we start thinking about the whites of the eyes as white, and they are not white. Look at how dark these eyes are. Do you see the white of the eye? It's like almost black. So I have to show that in my image. So I'm going to make my white of the eye a very dark gray, and I can always push it a little bit lighter, but I'm gonna start with it really pretty dark. So I'm going to make it using Payne's Gray, which is really like navy blue. and a little bit of that alizarin crimson, so that same recipe that I was using early on for that kind of dirty purple, and then some white I'm going to add to it. I'm gonna see how that works. And I'm switching down to a really small brush so that I can get in there and get my details in. And so I'm just gonna put this tiny little bit of gray in there, and it's gonna look it's definitely gonna look too dark to begin with, but I need to make the irises have some color in them. And once I do that, once the irises get a little bit darker, then the whites of the eyes won't look so weird. Sylvia's asking, how much paint am I loading on the brush? Lots. It really depends on what I'm doing. So for the most part right now though, I don't have a lot of paint on my brush. And especially when I'm doing these little details like the eyes. So now I'm gonna put in the iris color, which I think is a blue. I enhanced the color on this photo, and so sometimes when you do that, sometimes it actually picks up different colors. So I'm gonna have to ask this little guy's mom if his eyes are blue. If you are watching, Liz, if you wanna just confirm that he has blue eyes, that would be lovely. Thank you, because I've already painted the eyes the wrong color. But for right now, we're just gonna do him blue, and if his eyes are more of a green, we can always just tweak that. But I'm making the blue with Payne's Gray and white, but I'm gonna add a little bit of burnt umber in there to mute it down, because we don't want it to be too blue. We want it to be more of like a gray. And it's so fun when you get the eyes in, because it's like all of a sudden the piece just starts to have so much life. And I need to add some black to the pupil, but remember I don't actually do black. So I'm going to make my black using just Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. You want to make sure you don't have any white in there, because that'll dull it down. We want it to be straight black. I think I actually had a little bit on my brush. And I'll put that where the pupil is and where some of these eyelashes are. I never ever paint individual eyelashes. That's one thing I really want to stress, is just don't do it, because it looks weird. You look for large clumps of hair and you can put those in, but if you start painting individual lashes, it's gonna look really weird. Okay, so now we've got some dark shadows in there. Now I want to add the little flashes of light that you see, like the reflection on the eyes. And I wish you guys could see this a little bit better. I know it's kind of hard in that tiny little image. But I'm going to do these little flashes of light with some phthalo blue, which is like that really intense color that we used in the background. I'm gonna do that with some white. And I'm exaggerating this color on the eyes because I want to, and I like this color. So I'm putting it in brighter than what I see in the photo. And that's what I usually do. Because sometimes you just want to have a little more fun with the color, and I think the reflection of this color with the background underpainting is going to look fun. So we got it pretty bright there, and I'm going to add a little more white to it and brighten it up just a tiny bit. And sometimes when you are doing a painting and you get that little sparkle in the eye, it's amazing how like instantly the painting just kind of comes alive. So I like to do that early on in the piece because it's like it just lights it up. So we got that in there. I still will do a lot more detail to the eyes, but I just wanted to get that part in there. In fact, I'm going to do some warm shadows around the eyes. So I'm going to make another skin tone using my same 4-color recipe, but now I'm going to go quite a bit darker because I want to use it for some shading around the eyes. So I'm going to do burnt umber, the Pyrrole red, tiny bit of Hansa yellow, and tiny bit of white. It's going to be a lot more, mostly the burnt umber and Pyrrole red to make this new dark, dark color. I'm going to do some shadows around the eyes. So this is kind of like a burnt orange color. And that's gonna also look pretty against that blue that we put in the eyes. Put a little bit up there. I'll be doing some more shadows with this color too. Maybe while I have it on my brush, I'm gonna drop a little more red in it. I'm gonna put some shadows under the nose because I have this color already going. And I see this kind of bright red shadow under the nose. Typically that shadow under the nostrils is kind of a red tone. I've got a little bit of it over here. I don't really, well, yeah, I see a little bit over here on the neck too. I should probably have a bigger brush now in some of these larger areas, but just for the sake of time, I'm gonna drop this in now. I would normally switch to my bigger brush. Okay, so now let me get a little bit of color on the mouth, just so it starts to come alive a little bit. Teeth are another place that it's so easy to go wrong. The same thing with how teeth look white, and so we want to paint them in white. Teeth are not white. I don't care how much you brush your teeth, they're not white. They're in shadow. So always err on the side of making teeth darker, and you can always brighten them up just a little bit. Eva says, it looks like you're drying the brush on the rag. Why is that? I'm not drying it, I'm just, I'm wiping the paint off and I'm reshaping my brush. So I like to keep my tip very nice and sharp and square. And unfortunately, this brush has been well loved and it's starting to split on me, so I should probably throw it away. But the more that you kind of like wipe it on the brush and squeeze really tight, it just keeps bringing that shape back, which allows you to put down those nice brush strokes that are gonna flow. So good question, I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so going back to the white of the teeth, I'm going to make the teeth in the very center are gonna be the lightest. The ones that go back into the corners of the mouth are going to be darker. So I'm gonna start just by doing a wash over all of them, and then I'll pull out the ones in the center a little bit brighter. So I'm going to make my teeth color using, let's see, how am I gonna make my neutral? I'm gonna do some alizarin crimson, a little bit of Payne's gray, and a little bit of burnt umber on there. And I'm gonna thin it with a little bit of glaze to let some of that purple show through. And then I'm just gonna start putting the teeth color in, and you're gonna think they look dirty to start out with, but it's gonna be fine. Another tip that I have with teeth is be very careful about painting in the spaces between teeth. I almost never paint like an actual line between teeth. Now this little guy's got a gap between his two front teeth, and so I do have to kind of include that because otherwise it wouldn't look like him. But that's the only place that I'm gonna let any dark color come up between the teeth. For the rest of them, I'm just gonna kind of connect all the teeth. It's very easy to make a person look really monstrous and toothy. That can happen fast. So you have to just be really cautious about not making those teeth too bright and not painting the spaces between them too dramatically. So now I'm gonna go in and just add a new pass that's gonna be slightly lighter than my first layer. I got a little bit of red on my brush, but it'll be okay. Sometimes with these neutrals, it doesn't really matter what the color is. It's more about the value. So now this is slightly lighter. And if you think about, teeth are rounded too, so you don't necessarily put the color all the way across. Sometimes it's just being caught on part of the tooth. Okay. And now I'm going to go one more notch lighter, and then I'm going to stop with the teeth, and I'm going to move on to putting some color on the lips and on the gums that are like wrapping around the teeth, because there's like a pink tone wrapping around the teeth too that we need to get in there. So I'm only going to put this next brighter pass. That brush is just junk. I need some new little brushes. I need to treat myself and get some new ones. So this, I was about to say, this next layer of lighter, I'm only doing like in the very center. Yeah, and that's gonna be it for right now. Now I'm gonna put some color on the lips. For lips, I like to use a little bit of cadmium red, medium hue. And cadmium red I don't use very often. It's more of like a true red. It's kind of like a fire truck red. And so I use that with some pink quite a bit for lips. I don't use the cadmium red in my skin tones because it's more of a cool red. And I want my skin tones to be more like in the peach world. I'm going to try to find a little brush that's not going to split on me. Okay. So I'm doing that cadmium red, medium hue, and white. And a little bit of glaze in there, thin it out. And put some of that. Now the upper lip, we really don't see a very hard edge with where the lip starts and stops. And that's another place that we can often go wrong, is by making that edge of the lip too dramatic. It makes it look like they have lipstick on. So you just kind of want that to be rough and subtle and not like a sharp edge. Now the lower lip, it's getting a little bit deeper red there, and that's kind of unusual. Usually the lower lip is brighter, but just the way that this image is lit, it gets a little bit more intense of a red there. Sylvia's asking, before using the Geode filter on Pixar, do you adjust the image at all? Usually I filter it first in Pixar, and then I adjust it after that, because a lot of the time that Geode filter will cool down my colors a little too much. So sometimes I have to pump up the saturation afterwards. So usually I do the editing after doing the filter. Another great photo editing app that I like to use is called Snapseed, and that one you can kind of like spot hit. There's a brush tool where you can pump up the saturation in just certain areas, which is really nice. Okay, now we need to get the lips even darker in this corner, so I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin crimson, which is more of like a burgundy, to push my red a little bit darker. I need to get some more alizarin crimson on my palette here. I'm going to push that red darker just in the corner here. And that's going to make it look like the lips are receding and going back. And then we've got some of that underneath this upper lip. And then I'm going to use the same little mixture here to do the skin around the gums. That's kind of wrapping around the teeth. So it kind of dips down around the teeth. And I know this is probably very hard for you all to see at this point because it's kind of small, but I'm just getting it in there for right now. I made my teeth a little smaller there. All right. Okay. So let's go back and look at the whole image. I'd like to get some color. Oh boy, we are running out of time. Okay, so I want to get some color on the shirt just to kind of give you a feel for how that's going to look. So I'm going to layer some peach on top of the green. And I'm going to make my peach using the Pyrrole Red Light, because that's my orangey mixing color, a little bit of, tiny bit of Hansa Yellow, and some white. A little bit of Hansa Yellow. And I'm gonna put some glaze in there so I can still see my green poking through. And this color is gonna look really fun against the green. So I'm just gonna use my fat brush and just start putting some brush strokes down. I really like to get loose with my brush strokes in the background and on the clothing, because those are places where, you know, if you mess up, it's not like it's gonna not look like the person. You know, if I try to do a big fat loose brush strokes on his face, well, that could look kind of weird if I and often made his nose bigger than what it was supposed to be. But when we're talking about, you know, in the clothing or the background, that just doesn't really matter. So that's where I like to get a little bit more adventurous with my brush work. And definitely leave more of the underpainting showing. Okay, so I put some of the darker tones. Now I'm gonna add some more white. Need some more white out on my palette. All right. And I'm not blending these colors together. I'm letting this new tone just kind of sit right on top of what I had. And I'm thinking about the direction of the shirt. So I'm having my brush strokes go with the direction of the fabric. See how I'm really like being intentional about changing the direction, which leaves different shaped windows for that underpainting to poke through, which is fun. We want to be loose around our edges of the form, because when you do that, it makes a person look more rounded. When you have very sharp edges around them, it makes them look like a sticker on a background. But if you have slightly softer, choppier edges around your form, it integrates them into the background and makes it all just kind of make a little bit more sense. So definitely think about that when you're painting like anything. You want the edges to kind of melt into the background in some places, and then in other places let them be a little bit more hard edged. But it's fun to play with those things. Okay, so we got a little color on the shirt. Definitely gonna push that a little more, because now I'm noticing his shirt is similar tone to the face, and I don't like that. So I wanna intensify that shirt even more with some more dramatic orange tones. Maybe I'll even do just a pinch of that right now, because I wanna see a little bit more orange, especially over here. Yeah, that's better. Gotta pump that up a little bit. So again, that's artistic license. You gotta make it work for what you're trying to do. And so you just you know, paint it the way you want to see it. You get to do that. I'm putting some of these little pops up on his skin too, because the colors on the shirt reflect onto the face. All right, I wish I had more time, but it is 6 o'clock. So I'm going to say goodbye with this one. I will be sure to post progress on this piece. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, if this is your first demo, let me just say welcome. Again, I'm so glad you're here. And I do these every Monday at 5 Eastern. So I would love to see you again next week. And I would love it if you would share this demo if you know anybody else who might be interested in watching a free little painting class. Just hit that share button and share it on your page. I would be very, very grateful. So everybody have a great night. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next Monday. All right, happy painting.